A cocky boxer showboats mid-fight, turning his back on his opponent to flex for the cameras and mock the old karate nerds watching from the sidelines. Tommy the Tornado Castellano thinks he's found easy prey in the quiet volunteer who stepped forward to defend some teenagers at their community center. The arrogant fighter has no clue he just challenged the wrong man to step into the ring. But this mysterious stranger with the graying ponytail isn't just some random senior citizen. This is Steven Seagal himself, the Aikido master who's been breaking bones and taking names for 5 decades. While the cocky boxer poses and preens for his social media followers, completely defenseless with his back turned, the legendary martial artist moves with lightning speed. The few people who recognize the volunteer's true identity hold their breath, knowing they're about to witness decades of lethal training unleashed in one devastating moment. The boxer's crew keeps filming, thinking they're capturing another easy victory, but they're actually recording the instant they're golden. Boy learned the most painful lesson of his life. What happens when you showboat in front of a living legend? Can any fighter survive disrespecting Steven Seagal? What happened next would terrorize the cocky boxer for the rest of his pathetic career. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the empty parking lot of the Riverside Community Center as Robert, Bobby, Chin struggled with the stubborn lock on the front door. His arthritic fingers fumbled with the keys, a reminder that time was catching up with him faster than he cared to admit. At 68, Bobby had opened these doors every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 12 years, but today felt different. Heavier. Only 3 students waited by the entrance. Marcus Williams, 16, and carrying the weight of his family's struggles on his shoulders. Jenny Rodriguez, 14, and so quiet she seemed to disappear into herself. And Kevin Walsh, 17, and desperately hoping martial arts might give him the confidence his appearance never could. "Sorry, kids," Bobby muttered as the lock finally gave way. "These old hands aren't what they used to be." The dojo was a converted gymnasium with mirrors along one wall and traditional Aikido mats covering the floor. Faded posters of martial arts masters watched over the space like silent guardians. Bobby had hung them there years ago when the program began, back when 20 students showed up for each class. "Today we'll work on basic defensive forms," Bobby announced as the 3 students bowed and took their positions. His voice echoed in the nearly empty room. "Remember, Aikido is about redirecting aggression, not meeting it with force." Marcus went through the motions with natural athleticism but obvious impatience. Jenny practiced with careful precision, though she still flinched at the slightest contact. Kevin struggled with the basic stances, but his determination never wavered. Halfway through the lesson, the door opened with a sharp bang that made everyone jump. Patricia Manning, the community center director, entered with a stack of papers and the exhausted expression of someone fighting a losing battle. "Bobby, I need to speak with you." Her voice carried the weight of bad news. The students continued practicing as Patricia approached. "The board met last night. Unless enrollment increases dramatically by month's end, we're discontinuing the martial arts program." She paused, her kind eyes reflecting genuine regret. "The whole center might have to close if we can't find new funding sources." Bobby nodded slowly, having seen this coming for months. As Patricia left, he noticed a shadow pass by the window, a tall figure with long hair observing from the parking lot. But when he looked again, no one was there. Wednesday morning brought unseasonable warmth to Millfield, Oregon. Bobby was methodically cleaning the dojo mirrors when footsteps echoed in the hallway. A tall man appeared in the doorway, his presence somehow filling the entire room despite his quiet demeanor. Steven appeared to be in his early 70s, standing 6'4" with the kind of lean strength that comes from a lifetime of physical discipline. His graying hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and his dark eyes held an intensity that suggested he missed nothing. Simple black clothing, a plain t-shirt and dark jeans, gave no hint of his capabilities, but something about his posture spoke of controlled power. "Good morning," Steven said, his voice soft but carrying clearly across the space. "I'm interested in volunteering here. I understand you have a martial arts program." Bobby set down his cleaning cloth and studied the stranger. "We do, though not for much longer. Budget cuts. He gestured toward the mats. I'm Bobby Chun. I teach Aikido. Stephen, came the measured reply. Retired government worker. I have some experience with martial arts. When Bobby demonstrated a basic wrist escape technique, Stephen watched with the focused attention of someone who understood what he was seeing. Your form is solid, Stephen observed, though you might consider adjusting your hip position slightly. The leverage would be more effective. The suggestion was offered with such respect that Bobby wasn't offended, and when he tried the correction, the improvement was immediate. Stephen's knowledge was clearly profound, yet he deferred completely to Bobby's authority as the instructor. Patricia Manning entered as they talked, drawn by the sound of conversation. After a brief introduction and background check clearance, she seemed impressed by Stephen's respectful manner and his genuine interest in helping at-risk youth. The evening class could use an assistant, Bobby offered, sensing something special about this quiet volunteer as Stephen filled out paperwork. His precise handwriting and steady signature hinted at military or law enforcement background. Patricia mentioned to Bobby that the center's biggest challenge wasn't just funding. Many in the community saw martial arts as outdated compared to modern fitness programs. Their conversation was interrupted by loud music and shouting from the parking lot. Through the window, they could see a white Escalade blocking the handicap spots, its stereo pumping bass-heavy music that rattled the building's windows. Bobby noticed Stephen's expression didn't change, but his hands slowly clenched and unclenched. At his sides, the noise outside grew louder as Dale Morrison emerged from the Escalade like a man accustomed to making entrances. At 45, he was stocky and going soft around the middle, but he compensated with expensive tracksuit, gold chains, and an attitude that demanded attention. His white SUV dominated 3 parking spaces. Ms. Manning, Dale called out as he approached the entrance, his entourage trailing behind. Dale Morrison, Morrison's Boxing Palace. Got a proposition that's going to save this place. Patricia stepped outside reluctantly, Bobby and Stephen following. Dale's presence seemed to suck energy from the peaceful morning air. Charity exhibition. Match, Dale announced, producing a hastily printed flyer. My boy Tommy here fights a local challenger. Proceeds go to keeping your center open. Win-win situation. From the passenger side of the Escalade stepped Tommy, the Tornado Castellano, and it was immediately clear why he'd earned his nickname. At 28, he moved with the fluid confidence of someone who'd never lost a fight. Dark hair, classic, Italian features, and a smile that suggested he found everything around him amusing. His designer workout gear probably cost more than Bobby's monthly salary. This the dojo? Tommy laughed, peering through the window. Looks like a dance studio. What do you teach here, Grandpa? Slow-motion karate. His girlfriend Brandy emerged from the back seat, immediately pulling out her phone to document everything. She was all bleached hair and artificial enhancement, treating the community center like a photo opportunity. Here's the thing, Dale continued, his tone becoming more businesslike. We need this to happen Saturday. 3 days' notice. Other venues are interested, but I believe in giving back to the community. He produced a contract from his briefcase, with the practiced motion of someone who'd done this before. The document was dense with legal language and fine print. I don't know, Patricia began, but Dale pressed harder. Lady, you said yourself this place is going under. This is your lifeline. Tommy's undefeated, draws big crowds. We're talking serious money here. Stephen had remained silent throughout the exchange, observing from near the doorway. His expression hadn't changed, but Bobby noticed his volunteers. Breathing had become very controlled, very deliberate. Tommy noticed Stephen and grinned. Hey, check it out. Grandpa probably learned kung fu from watching movies. You know any of that ancient wisdom stuff, old man? Still Stephen said nothing, but something flickered behind his dark eyes. So what's it gonna be? Dale demanded, waving. The contract. You want to save this place or watch it die? Patricia looked at Bobby, desperation clear in her face. The community center was more than just a building to her. It was a lifeline for dozens of families. With visible reluctance, she reached for the contract. Thursday afternoon brought unwelcome visitors to the peaceful dojo. Tommy Castellano arrived, early for his photo opportunity, accompanied by a bored reporter from the Millfield Herald and an enthusiastic blogger with an expensive camera. The media presence, minimal as it was, seemed to inflate Tommy's already considerable ego. Steven was working with Marcus, Jenny, and Kevin on basic defensive stances when Tommy's crew invaded the space with their equipment and attitude. The contrast was jarring. The students' quiet concentration shattered by loud voices and intrusive cameras. "This what passes for martial arts around here," Tommy announced to his audience, his voice carrying across the room. "Looks like dance class for weaklings." He approached Marcus, who had been practicing a simple blocking technique. "Hey kid, show me some of that fake karate. Let's see what you got." Marcus hesitated, glancing towards Steven, who watched the interaction with increasing tension. When Marcus didn't immediately respond, Tommy pushed him lightly on the shoulder, just hard enough to make the teenager stumble backward. "That's what I thought. All flash, no substance." Bobby stepped forward, his dignity intact despite the humiliation. "Mr. Castellano, perhaps you don't understand what we teach here. Aikido is about what? About getting your ass kicked by real fighters." Tommy's laugh was cruel. "Tell you what, old-timer. Show these kids how effective your ancient wisdom is. Let's have a friendly demonstration." The cameras rolled, as Bobby found himself maneuvered into accepting the challenge. The match, if it could be called that, was painful to watch. Bobby's technique was solid, but his age showed as Tommy easily overwhelmed him with basic boxing combinations, stopping just short of causing serious injury. As Bobby lay winded on the mat, Tommy played to the cameras. "Anyone else want to try? Their traditional skills against modern boxing." The students looked away in shame. Marcus's fists clenched with helpless anger. Jenny seemed to shrink into herself, while Kevin stared at the floor. The blogger kept filming, delighted with the dramatic footage. That's when Steven stepped forward from the shadows where he'd been watching everything with cold calculation. "I'll give it a try," he said quietly. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Tommy turned, sizing up this new opponent. Tall, gray-haired, probably in his 70s. An easy target. "Oh, this is perfect," Tommy laughed, gesturing to his cameraman. "Keep rolling. This is going to be hilarious. Grandpa wants to dance." As Steven removed his shirt, revealing a body that showed every one of his 70-plus years, but also decades of conditioning, something shifted in the room's atmosphere. His movements were economical, purposeful. As he stepped onto the mat, Tommy bounced on his toes. Loosening up like this was just another easy publicity stunt. But in the growing silence, a few people in the room began to sense they were about to witness something extraordinary. The dojo had grown crowded with curious onlookers who'd heard about the impromptu match. Tommy bounced on his toes, shadowboxing for the cameras, while Steven stood perfectly still in the center of the mat. His breathing was slow, controlled, meditative. "You sure about this, old man?" Tommy called out, throwing a few flashy jabs into the air. "I don't want to hurt you too bad in front of your students." Patricia tried to intervene, worried about liability issues, but Steven assured her quietly that he'd signed all necessary waivers. His calm demeanor was unsettling. Most men his age would show some nervousness facing a professional fighter. "Whenever you're ready," Steven said simply. Tommy came out dancing, throwing combinations that looked impressive to untrained eyes. But every punch whistled through empty air as Steven moved with minimal effort, staying just outside the boxer's range. It wasn't flashy. Steven simply wasn't there when the punches arrived. The crowd began to murmur as Tommy's early confidence gave way to frustration. 5 minutes of aggressive boxing, and he hadn't landed a single clean shot. Meanwhile, Steven appeared completely fresh, his breathing unchanged, never seeming hurried or concerned. "Stand still and fight," Tommy snarled. Increasing his aggression, Steven continued to flow around the attacks like water, demonstrating perfect distance management. His movements were economical, purposeful, showing decades of training distilled into efficient motion. Tommy's punches grew wilder, his technique deteriorating as frustration mounted. Marcus watched in amazement as his quiet volunteer displayed fighting skills that belonged in movies. Jenny had stopped cringing, mesmerized by Steven's fluid grace. Even Kevin recognized he was witnessing something special. Tommy paused, breathing hard and sweating despite the cool morning air. Steven looked exactly as he had when the match began. Calm, centered, completely in control. "What's wrong, son?" Steven asked with genuine concern. "Getting tired?" The question hit Tommy like a slap. Here he was, a professional fighter in his prime, and this elderly man was asking if he needed a break. The humiliation was unbearable. Tommy snarled and launched a wild haymaker with everything he had behind it. Stephen stepped slightly to the side, and Tommy's fist whistled through empty air as he stumbled forward, completely off balance and vulnerable. Tommy recovered from his missed haymaker and did something that revealed the depths of his arrogance. Instead of facing his opponent, he turned toward the crowd with arms raised in mock victory. "See how easy this is," he shouted to the cameras, completely ignoring Stephen behind him. "This old man can't even land a finger on me." He flexed his muscles and pointed at the camera with theatrical flair, his back completely turned to Stephen. The blogger zoomed in, capturing every moment of Tommy's premature celebration. "These ancient martial arts are a joke," Tommy continued. His performance. "Real fighting happens in real gyms with real." The sound that cut through the air was sharp and decisive, a crack that echoed throughout the room like a gunshot. Stephen had moved with explosive speed that seemed impossible for a man his age. One step forward, a precise elbow strike to Tommy's solar plexus from behind. Tommy's eyes widened in shock as all air left his lungs. His mouth opened, but no sound emerged except desperate gasping. He dropped to his knees, clutching his chest, unable to speak or breathe properly. The room fell completely silent except for Tommy's struggles. Even the blogger stopped filming, too stunned by what he'd captured to keep recording. Stephen's expression remained calm, almost compassionate, as he watched Tommy fight for breath. This wasn't about humiliation or showing off. It was a lesson about respect and the dangers of arrogance delivered with surgical precision. "Breathe slowly," Stephen instructed, kneeling beside the gasping boxer with genuine concern. "In through your nose, out through your mouth. You're going to be fine." The contrast was striking, Stephen showing more compassion for his opponent than Tommy had shown for anyone all day. As Tommy's breathing gradually returned to normal, Stephen helped him to his feet with gentle strength. The camera captured Tommy's face in that moment, no longer arrogant or mocking, but shocked and humbled. The transformation was complete and visible to everyone in the room. Dale Morrison pushed through the crowd, his face red with anger, but stopped short when he saw Stephen's calm, steady gaze. Something about the older man's presence suggested that escalating this situation would be unwise. Tommy, now able to speak, looked directly at Stephen with new understanding dawning in his eyes. Dale Morrison's voice boomed across the silent dojo as he shoved through the crowd. "Do you know who you just assaulted? That's Tommy Castellano. He's worth millions. This is going to cost you everything, old man." Stephen listened calmly, hands clasped behind his back, his expression unchanged. The reporter fumbled with his notebook, unsure whether he'd witnessed a crime or something else entirely. "What's your name?" the blogger demanded, still filming. "Our viewers want to know who did this." Stephen deflected quietly, saying he was just a volunteer who believed in protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. But Marcus had been staring at him with growing recognition, something familiar nagging at his memory. Pulling out his phone, Marcus scrolled through images until he found what he was looking for, a movie poster from 1991's Out for Justice. He held it up next to Stephen, and the resemblance was unmistakable despite the decades. "That's you, isn't it?" Marcus said, his voice filled with awe. "You're Steven Seagal." The crowd gasped as they realized they'd witnessed a legendary action star in actual combat. Whispers rippled through the room as people pulled out their phones, searching for images to confirm what Marcus had discovered. Stephen neither confirmed nor denied the identification. He simply repeated his earlier words about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, deflecting attention from himself to the principles he represented. Tommy, now able to speak clearly, surprised everyone by approaching Stephen with extended hand. "I deserved that," he said quietly, loud enough for the cameras to hear. "I was way out of line. You were defending those kids, and I was being a complete ass." The gesture wasn't lost on the crowd. Here was professional fighters showing more class in defeat than he'd shown in victory. Patricia seized the moment, announcing that the exhibition had generated enough interest to potentially save the community center. Local news crews were already arriving, having caught wind of the story through social media, but as reporters swarmed the building, Stephen slipped away through the back exit, avoiding the spotlight he'd never wanted. In the parking lot, Dale Morrison made a phone call, his voice tight with anger. "We have a problem," he said into his phone. "Get Mr. Romano on the line." Now, the celebration inside continued, but the real battle was just beginning. Thursday evening brought unexpected energy to the community center. Word had spread quickly through social media about Steven Seagal's appearance, and Bobby's usual handful of students had tripled to nearly 20 curious locals wanting to learn Aikido. Steven assisted quietly from the background, correcting techniques and offering gentle encouragement. He seemed more comfortable as a helper than as the center of attention, deflecting questions about his identity while focusing on the students' progress. Patricia was fielding calls from local media outlets wanting to schedule interviews. The story had legs. Legendary action star defending teenagers at small-town community center. It was exactly the kind of positive publicity that could save their funding. The good mood shattered when Dale Morrison returned with a completely different demeanor. Gone was the flashy showman. In his place stood a cold, calculating businessman who radiated quiet menace. After reconsidering the liability issues, he announced to Patricia, "The exhibition match is canceled." Patricia protested, pointing to the contract he'd insisted she sign just hours earlier. Dale smiled without warmth and produced the document, flipping to the fine print. "All agreements were contingent on suitable venue conditions," he read aloud. "I'm declaring this facility unsafe and unsuitable for professional boxing." Steven watched from across the room as Dale's mask slipped completely. This had never been about charity or community support. It was a setup from the beginning. "You see," Dale continued, his voice taking on a predatory edge, "I represent developers who want to purchase this land for a shopping complex. The exhibition was designed to demonstrate that your martial arts program is a public safety hazard." Patricia realized she'd been played, her desperation used against her and her community. The contract she'd signed in hope had actually sealed the center's fate. As Dale prepared to leave, savoring his victory, he mentioned his business partner, almost casually. "Vincent Romano has big plans for this property. Been waiting a long time to develop this area." At the mention of that name, Steven's entire demeanor changed. His face went pale, then hardened with recognition and old anger that ran deeper than professional disappointment. "Vincent Romano?" Steven asked quietly, his voice carrying new weight. Dale's smirk widened as he recognized Steven's reaction. "You know him? Small world." "He knows you too, Steven Seagal. Been looking forward to this reunion for 15 years. As Dale's Escalade disappeared into the gathering darkness, Steven stood motionless, staring after it with the expression of a man facing ghosts from his past. Thursday night, 10:30 p.m. Steven sat alone in the empty dojo, legs folded in meditation position, surrounded by darkness and memories he'd tried to bury. The mention of Vincent Romano's name had unlocked a door he'd kept sealed for 15 years. The images came flooding back. 1995, Southeast Asia, an undercover CIA operation that had consumed 2 years of his life. Vincent Romano had been running an international arms trafficking network, using martial arts tournaments as perfect cover to move weapons to terrorist organizations across 3 continents. Steven remembered the tournaments clearly now, legitimate. Fighters mixed with dealers, spectators who were actually buyers, and Romano orchestrating it all with the smooth charm of a successful businessman. The weapons flowed through seemingly innocent sporting events, while Romano collected millions and destabilized entire regions. Steven's testimony had been crucial to Romano's conviction. He'd spent months building the case, documenting transactions, recording conversations, gathering evidence that federal prosecutors called airtight. Romano received 15 years for weapons trafficking and racketeering, but during sentencing, he turned to Steven with eyes full of hatred. "This isn't over," Romano had promised from the defendant's table. 15 years isn't forever. I'll find you, and when I do, you'll pay for destroying everything I built." Steven had left his CIA career shortly after the Romano trial, haunted by the violence he'd witnessed and seeking the quiet life he'd never known. For 15 years, he'd moved from place to place, never staying long enough to form lasting connections. Always looking over his shoulder, the Millfield Community Center had been his first attempt to stop running, to find peace through teaching and helping others. Now Romano had found him, and innocent people were caught in the crossfire of their old war. His phone rang, shattering the meditation. Patricia Manning's voice was trembling, frightened. "Stephen, they broke into my house tonight. They didn't take anything, but they left a message on my bathroom mirror. Close the center or face the consequences. I'm scared. I don't understand what's happening." Stephen's jaw clenched as he recognized Romano's methods: psychological warfare through innocent targets. "Pack a bag and stay with family tonight," he instructed. "I'll handle this." As he hung up, Stephen realized Romano wasn't just after revenge. He was using the entire community as leverage. Friday morning, 7 a.m. Stephen arrived at the community center to find systematic vandalism that spoke of professional execution. Graffiti covered the front entrance, karate kills, and shut down the danger zone in fresh red paint. Patricia's car sat on four slashed tires in the parking lot. Stephen examined the scene with professional thoroughness. The vandalism was too precise, too targeted to be random. Someone had studied the building's layout and chosen their damage for maximum psychological impact while staying within the bounds of misdemeanor charges. Throughout the morning, Romano's intimidation campaign escalated with surgical precision. Stephen's phone rang repeatedly as the community came under attack through its most vulnerable members. Rosa Williams called first, her voice thick with tears. Marcus's mother had been fired from her cleaning job with no explanation, despite 3 years of perfect attendance. The company claimed restructuring, but wouldn't provide details. Jenny Rodriguez's family received threatening phone calls throughout the night. Anonymous voices warned them to keep their daughter away from dangerous people and suggested that accidents happen to families who don't listen. Kevin Walsh's father discovered sudden building code violations at his small restaurant. Inspectors who'd never visited before found problems that would cost thousands to fix, problems that hadn't existed the day before. Each incident was carefully calculated, enough pressure to terrify without crossing into serious criminal activity. Romano was applying leverage through innocent parties rather than direct confrontation, knowing that Stephen's protective instincts would make these attacks more effective than physical threats. Stephen recognized the methodology from their previous encounters. Romano preferred psychological warfare to violence, understanding that fear was often more effective than force. He attacked through systems, employment, housing, health inspections, making his victims feel helpless against an enemy. They couldn't see or fight, but by noon, the pattern was clear. Every family connected to the martial arts program was being systematically targeted. Romano was sending a message: abandon Steven Seagal or watch your lives destroyed piece by piece. Steven's phone rang again. Bobby Chin's voice was weak, frightened, calling from Memorial Hospital room 314. "Stephen, I need you here. They were waiting for me when I got home last night." Bobby's voice cracked with pain and fear. "Broken ribs, concussion. But Stephen, they knew things about you, about your past. They said this is just the beginning." Stephen was already moving toward his car as the call ended, his face set with grim determination. Friday afternoon, 1:30 p.m. Memorial Hospital's sterile corridors felt oppressive as Stephen made his way to Bobby's room. The elderly instructor lay heavily bandaged but alert, his kind eyes now carrying shadows of fear and pain. Bobby's attackers had been professionals. They knew exactly how much damage to inflict without causing permanent injury or death. 2 men in their 30s, well-dressed, who spoke about Stephen's debt to Mr. Romano while methodically breaking Bobby's ribs. "They said Romano's been planning this reunion for years," Bobby whispered, wincing with each breath, "waiting for the right moment to strike. They knew about your government work, your testimony. This isn't random revenge. It's been carefully orchestrated." Stephen studied his friend's injuries with the clinical eye of someone who'd seen violence. Professionally administered. Romano's message was clear: anyone who helped Stephen would suffer the consequences. "You need to leave town," Bobby insisted, gripping Stephen's arm with surprising strength. "These people aren't just criminals. They're organized, connected. They have resources and patience. The community will survive if you go." Stephen shook his head firmly. "Running won't solve this. Romano will just find another way to hurt innocent people. The only way to stop him is to face him directly." Bobby started to protest, but Stephen's expression had hardened with resolve. "I'm done running. These people, you, the students, their families, you didn't ask for this fight, but you're caught in it because of me. That makes it my responsibility to end it. When Stephen returned to the community center, he found Marcus, Jenny, and Kevin waiting for him despite their family's fears and the mounting pressure to quit. Their presence spoke of courage beyond their years. Our parents want us to stay away, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the circumstances. They're scared, and I don't blame them. But we're not running. Jenny nodded, her usual shyness replaced by quiet determination. You taught us that martial arts is about protecting people who can't protect themselves. Our families can't fight back against these people, but maybe we can learn how. Kevin stepped forward, his typical self-deprecating humor absent. If you'll teach us what we really need to know, not just traditional forms, but how to defend ourselves and our families, we want to learn. Stephen studied their faces, seeing young people forced to grow up too quickly by circumstances beyond their control. Their courage humbled him. All right, he said quietly, moving to lock the doors and close the blinds. But what I'm going to teach you isn't just about fighting. It's about protecting what matters, thinking strategically, and understanding your enemy. Are you ready for that responsibility? All three nodded without hesitation. Stephen's real training was about to begin, Saturday morning, 6 a.m. Stephen had transformed the peaceful dojo into something resembling a tactical training facility. The mirrors were covered with diagrams showing escape routes, pressure points, and situational awareness concepts. Traditional Aikido had been replaced by practical self-defense techniques designed for real-world threats. Marcus, Jenny, and Kevin arrived early, their faces showing the strain of family pressure but also growing resolve. Stephen had restructured their training completely, focusing on survival skills rather than traditional forms. Romano won't come at us directly, Stephen explained as they warmed up. He uses fear, intimidation, and leverage against people's weaknesses. You need to learn to think like your enemy, to anticipate threats before they develop into crises. The training was physically and mentally demanding. Stephen taught them to recognize surveillance, to vary their routines, to identify escape routes wherever they went. He shared stories from his government days, explaining how predators operated and how to recognize danger before it escalated. Marcus proved to have natural leadership instincts and quick reflexes that adapted well to Stephen's practical techniques. Jenny discovered that her quiet nature was actually an advantage. She could observe and move unnoticed in ways that larger people couldn't. Kevin's size became a strength rather than a liability under Stephen's guidance, his methodical approach perfect for the strategic thinking Stephen emphasized. The most important lesson, Stephen told them during a water break, is that real martial arts isn't about proving you're tough. It's about being smart enough to avoid fights when possible and skilled enough to end them quickly when they're unavoidable. The intensive session was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. Tommy Castellano appeared at the back door, still bearing fading bruises from their encounter, but approaching with obvious respect. Mr. Seagal, Tommy said quietly, I heard about what happened to Bobby. I know I was completely out of line before, but I want to help now. Dale Morrison isn't who he pretends to be. I've seen things at his gym that didn't look legal. Stephen studied Tommy's face for signs of deception, reading body language and micro-expressions with practice skill. What he saw was genuine remorse and a desire for redemption. If you'll have me, Tommy continued, I want to make up for what I did. These people hurt an innocent old man because of a situation I helped create. Stephen's response was measured but direct. Can you handle a gun? The question hung in the air as Tommy's eyes widened, finally understanding the true scope of what they were facing. Saturday evening, 7:45 p.m. Stephen's expanded group, now including Tommy, was deep in tactical training when Patricia arrived with trembling hands clutching a formal envelope. Her face was pale, and she could barely speak as she handed it to Stephen. This was delivered to my house an hour ago by a man in an expensive suit, she whispered. He waited while I read it, then told me to make sure you got it immediately. Stephen opened the envelope carefully, noting the expensive letterhead and formal presentation. Vincent Romano's message was written in elegant script that somehow made the threat more chilling. Steven Seagal, my old friend. I hear you've been teaching children to fight. How noble of you, trying to turn innocents into soldiers for your personal war. I have a proposition that will end this unpleasantness cleanly. A winner-take-all tournament. You against my chosen fighters. If you win, I leave Millfield permanently and never return. If you lose, you publicly apologize for your past lies about my business dealings and leave town forever. The community center closes, but the families remain unharmed. You have 24 hours to decide. The tournament will be held Sunday night at Warehouse District, Building 47. Come alone, or the offer is withdrawn and my methods become less civilized. Your devoted admirer, Vincent Romano. The students gathered around as Stephen finished reading, their faces showing a mixture of fear and determination. Tommy's expression darkened with recognition. I know that warehouse, Tommy said grimly. I fought in underground tournaments for Dale Morrison there. It's a setup, Mr. Seagal. The place is designed for Romano's advantage, multiple levels. Controlled access, no witnesses he doesn't want. Stephen studied the letter again, recognizing Romano's preferred methodology. The criminal had always believed in grand gestures and public humiliation, viewing life as a stage where he could demonstrate his superiority. These aren't regular fighters he'll use, Tommy continued urgently. Dale's been recruiting from prisons. Military washouts, people with nothing to lose and everything to prove. They fight dirty and don't care about rules or honor. Stephen folded the letter calmly, his decision already made. I'll do it. The students immediately protested, but Stephen raised his hand for silence. Romano wants a show. This gives me a chance to end it without more innocent people getting hurt. Tommy shook his head desperately. You don't understand what you're walking into. Stephen's response was quiet but chilling. Then they're about to meet someone who's lost everything and found it again. Sunday morning, 8 a.m. Stephen sat in perfect meditation in the empty dojo, his movements flowing through kata with decades of muscle memory. Each technique was precise, economical, a lifetime of martial arts mastery condensed into fluid perfection. He wasn't just preparing physically, but mentally and spiritually for what might be his final battle. Tommy arrived with intelligence about the warehouse location and Romano's likely tactics. Building 47 had multiple levels connected by narrow staircases, allowing for different fighting environments that could favor various combat styles. Romano typically used 3 fighters, each representing different martial arts disciplines designed to test every aspect of an opponent's abilities. The first fight will probably be straight boxing, Tommy explained, sketching the warehouse layout on a whiteboard. Big, powerful guy who'll try to overwhelm you with aggression. Second fight usually involves grappling. Someone with wrestling or jiu-jitsu background who'll take it to the ground. The third fighter is Romano's wild card. Could be anything from weapons combat to multiple attackers. Stephen absorbed the information while continuing his physical preparation, developing strategies for each potential matchup. His training had prepared him for exactly these scenarios, but at his age, he couldn't afford to make mistakes. Despite Stephen's reluctance to involve them further, the students insisted on serving as support. Marcus had natural street instincts. That could help with reconnaissance. Jenny's quiet nature made her perfect for gathering information without being noticed. Kevin's methodical mind was ideal for logistics and emergency planning. You can't do this alone, Marcus argued. You taught us that martial arts is about protecting people. Let us protect you. Stephen accepted their involvement with reluctance, understanding that he couldn't shield everyone from the consequences of his past. Tommy proved his loyalty by offering to serve as Stephen's corner man, despite the personal risk of betraying Dale Morrison's operation. As evening approached, Stephen gathered his makeshift team for final preparations. I want you all to understand something, he said solemnly. What happens tonight isn't about revenge or proving who's stronger. It's about protecting people who can't protect themselves. That's what real martial arts represents. Patricia arrived, with research that changed everything. Stephen, I've been investigating Romano's conviction. He was released 3 months ago, but not on parole. All charges were overturned on a technicality. Officially, he was never convicted of anything. Stephen realized Romano wasn't just seeking revenge. He was rebuilding his criminal empire, and Stephen was the only witness who could stop him. Sunday night, 9 p.m. Warehouse District Building 47 buzzed with dangerous energy as Stephen arrived to find Romano's underground fighting venue in full operation. The converted industrial space featured makeshift bleachers filled with rough-looking spectators and professional lighting that turned the concrete floor into a legitimate-appearing arena. Vincent Romano emerged from the crowd like a predator, surveying his domain. At 52, he was impeccably dressed in an expensive suit, his silver hair perfectly styled, radiating the confidence of a man who'd never lost a game he'd rigged. His smile was warm and welcoming, but his eyes remained cold and calculating. "Stephen, my old friend," Romano greeted him with arms spread wide. 15 years, and you haven't changed a bit. Still playing the noble protector, I see." Their reunion was cordial on the surface, but loaded with menace underneath. Romano had invited news cameramen, carefully selected ones who would document everything for maximum public impact while ensuring the narrative favored his version of events. Romano explained the rules with theatrical flair. 3 fights, each with different parameters designed to test different aspects of Stephen's abilities. First fight, traditional boxing against a professional heavyweight. Second fight, mixed martial arts with no holds barred against a ground fighting specialist. Third fight, Romano's choice of weapons and fighting style against an opponent of his selection. "You must win all 3 to claim victory," Romano announced to the crowd. "Lose even one, and our agreement is void." The first opponent was revealed. With dramatic lighting, Iron Mike Rodriguez, a massive former heavyweight boxer standing 6'6" and weighing at least 280 pounds of muscle and scar tissue. His face showed the damage of 100 fights, his hands were like sledgehammers, and his reputation for brutality was legendary in underground circles. Stephen studied his opponent with professional detachment, noting Iron Mike's stance, the way he moved, the old injuries that might create weaknesses. The boxer was younger, stronger, and had reach advantage, but Stephen had faced worse odds before. Romano addressed the crowd like a master showman. "Ladies and gentlemen, witness the twilight of a legend. Age and treachery versus youth and skill." As Stephen stepped into the makeshift ring, he noticed Romano smiling with supreme confidence. The criminal had orchestrated this entire evening, and Stephen was walking directly into his trap. But sometimes, Stephen reflected, the only way out of a trap was straight through it. The bell rang, and Iron Mike charged forward like an avalanche. A violent Sunday night, 10:15 p.m. Stephen had methodically dismantled both Iron Mike and the second fighter, a vicious mixed martial arts specialist named Carlos who tried to take the fight to the ground. Stephen's combination of Aikido principles, karate precision, and projects served as fronts for washing criminal proceeds, with small towns providing perfect cover for large cash transactions that would trigger scrutiny in major cities. The evidence was overwhelming but needed proper handling to be legally useful. The students had documented everything meticulously, but they needed adult help to present it effectively. Bobby Chin arrived at their meeting despite being released from the hospital against medical advice. His ribs were still heavily bandaged, but his determination matched the students'. "I've been making calls to old contacts from my police days," Bobby explained carefully. "There's a detective named Linda Martinez who works for the state attorney general's office investigating corruption. She's been trying to build a case against Romano for months." The students realized they weren't just fighting for their community center. They were potentially the first line of defense against a spreading criminal enterprise that would destroy dozens of other communities if left unchecked. "If we can get our evidence to Detective Martinez," Jenny said quietly, "maybe we can stop this before it gets worse." Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Tommy Castellano's arrival at Jenny's house surprised everyone. The former boxer looked haggard, as if he hadn't slept, but his expression showed absolute resolve. He'd been wrestling with his conscience since Stephen's arrest and had information that could change everything. "I need to tell you something," Tommy began, his voice heavy with guilt. "Something I should have said before, but I was too ashamed. Dale Morrison's gym has been a front for Romano's money laundering operation for over a year." The revelation hit the group like a physical blow. Tommy explained that the boxing matches were elaborate covers for illegal gambling operations, with fighters taking predetermined dives while Romano's associates collected millions in bets. Tommy had participated unwillingly, threatened with exposure of his own past mistakes, unpaid taxes, and association with questionable characters. "But there's more," Tommy continued, his voice gaining strength. "Romano keeps detailed records of everything. Video evidence of bribing officials, financial records, recorded conversations. He stores it all in a safe at Morrison's gym as insurance against betrayal. The students exchanged glances as the implications became clear. Those files could expose Romano's entire network and exonerate Stephen, but accessing them would require breaking into a criminal organization's headquarters. "Why are you telling us this now?" Marcus asked suspiciously. Tommy's answer was simple and direct. "Because Steven Seagal stood up for people who couldn't defend themselves, and I helped destroy him for it. I can't live with that on my conscience." Bobby suggested contacting Detective Martinez immediately, but Tommy shook his head. Martinez has been trying to penetrate Romano's organization for months without success. The evidence exists, but it's protected behind layers of security and criminal associates. We need to get those files to her, not just tell her they exist. The group realized they were contemplating something far more dangerous than gathering information. They were planning to infiltrate a criminal operations stronghold and steal evidence that could destroy powerful, violent people. "This isn't a game," Bobby warned, his police experience showing. "These people have killed to protect smaller secrets than what you're talking about accessing." Jenny spoke up quietly. "Stephen risked his life to protect us. Now we need to risk ours to protect him." Kevin nodded agreement. "He taught us that real martial arts is about defending people who can't defend themselves. Right now, that's Stephen." Marcus looked around the room at his unlikely team. A disgraced boxer seeking redemption, an injured elderly instructor, a shy girl with unexpected courage, and an overweight teenager who'd found his strength. "When do we do this?" he asked Tommy. "Tonight," came the reply. Romano's getting impatient. "If we wait any longer, those files might disappear forever." Tuesday night, 11 p.m. Morrison's boxing palace sat dark and silent in an industrial district that emptied after business hours. The building's security system was sophisticated but not impenetrable to someone with Tommy's inside knowledge and the students' careful preparation. Jenny and Kevin served as lookouts from strategic positions with clear sightlines and communication via burner phones Bobby had procured. Their job was to provide early warning of approaching threats while Marcus and Tommy infiltrated the building. Using Tommy's access codes and knowledge of guard rotations, the break-in revealed the true scope of Romano's rebuilt empire. The safe contained evidence that went far beyond local corruption. Video recordings showed Romano bribing federal judges, state senators, and law enforcement officials across multiple jurisdictions. Financial records detailed a money laundering network that processed tens of millions of dollars through legitimate construction projects. "Jesus," Marcus whispered as they copied files onto multiple flash drives. "This isn't just about our community center. Romano's been rebuilding everything Stephen destroyed 15 years ago." The most damaging evidence came from Romano's own recordings, conversations where he discussed framing Stephen, bribing officials to ensure conviction, and his long-term plans for expansion. His ego had led him to document his own crimes as trophies, but among the files, Marcus discovered something that made his blood run cold: detailed plans for Stephen's elimination. Romano had arranged for Stephen's suicide in jail, scheduled to occur within 48 hours. The recordings revealed cooperation from corrupt guards and inmates, all designed to look like guilt and despair had driven the legendary fighter to take his own life. "We're not just gathering evidence," Marcus realized with growing horror. "We're racing against an execution schedule." Tommy confirmed the timeline based on his knowledge of Romano's methods. He always eliminates problems before they can escalate. If Stephen lives long enough to mount a defense, Romano's whole operation could be exposed. They worked frantically to copy everything while monitoring communications from their lookouts. The evidence was overwhelming. Romano's entire criminal network laid bare through his own arrogance and need to document his victories that they prepared to leave. Marcus made a discovery that changed their understanding of Romano's ultimate goal. Hidden among the financial records were purchase agreements for properties in 12 different states, small communities where Romano planned to replicate his Millfield operation. "This was never just about revenge," Marcus breathed. "Stephen stumbled into a test case. Romano's been using our town as a prototype for a nationwide expansion." The students realized they weren't just fighting for Stephen's life. They were potentially the last line of defense against a criminal enterprise that would destroy dozens of communities if it succeeded in Millfield. time was running out, and they still had to get the evidence to Detective Martinez before Romano discovered what they'd done. Wednesday morning, 7 a.m. Detective Linda Martinez sat in her state office reviewing the evidence the students had risked everything to obtain. At 48, she was a tough, no-nonsense investigator with 25 years of experience fighting corruption, but even she was stunned by the scope of what they'd uncovered. "This is the breakthrough we've been seeking for months," Martinez admitted, scrolling through Romano's own recorded conversations. "But the legal process takes time Stephen doesn't have." According to these files, Romano's planned his elimination for tonight. The evidence was overwhelming. Federal prosecutors were already mobilizing to build cases across multiple jurisdictions. But Romano's corruption ran so deep that traditional legal channels couldn't move fast enough to save Stephen's life. Martinez made a career-defining decision that went against every protocol she'd followed for decades. Using emergency federal powers and her contacts with U.S. Marshals, she arranged Stephen's immediate transfer to federal custody while charges were prepared. "This could end my career," she told Bobby and the students as federal agents prepared the extraction. "But if we let Romano murder the key witness against his organization, justice dies with him." Stephen was transferred from county jail just 4 hours before Romano's assassination plan was scheduled to execute. As federal marshals escorted him from the building, he saw his students waiting outside. Marcus, Jenny, Kevin, Tommy, and Bobby, all bearing the marks of their dangerous mission but victorious. "Your students saved your life, Mr. Seagal," Martinez explained as Stephen processed his freedom. "They also handed us the biggest corruption case this state has seen in decades. Romano's entire network is being dismantled as we speak." But their celebration was premature. Stephen's expression darkened as Martinez continued. "Romano knows we have the evidence now. He's going to make one final play before we can arrest him. Are you ready to finish this?" Stephen understood immediately. Romano's ego would never allow him to flee quietly or surrender peacefully. He'd make a grand gesture, something designed to cause maximum damage while satisfying his need for theatrical revenge. "Where is he?" Stephen asked quietly. Martinez's answer confirmed his worst fears. "He's barricaded himself at your community center with hostages, claiming he has explosives."
"He's demanding to meet with you personally." The final confrontation that had been building for 15 years was about to begin, with innocent lives hanging in the balance. Wednesday afternoon, 4 p.m., the Riverside Community Center was surrounded
by federal agents, local police, and news crews as Romano's final gambit played out under media spotlights. He'd taken Patricia Manning hostage and barricaded himself inside the dojo where Stephen had found peace, turning the place of learning into a fortress of revenge. Romano's demands were simple and theatrical. A personal meeting with Steven Seagal, with news cameras recording everything for posterity. He claimed to have wired the building with explosives that would detonate if his conditions weren't met, threatening to destroy the center and kill innocent hostages. Stephen approached the building alone despite federal agents' strong objections. Through the windows, he could see Romano pacing in the dojo like a caged predator, Patricia bound to a chair in the center of the room. "Stephen," Romano called out as his nemesis entered. 15 years I've waited for this moment. 15 years of planning, building, preparing for our final dance." The confrontation became intensely personal as Romano revealed the true depth of his hatred. Stephen's testimony hadn't just destroyed Romano's criminal empire, it had cost him his family, his reputation, and 15 years of his life behind bars. This wasn't about money or territory anymore. It was about making Stephen suffer as Romano had suffered. "You self-righteous bastard," Romano snarled, producing a pistol. "You destroyed everything I built, everyone I cared about. Now I'm going to take everything you care about." The two men engaged in brutal hand-to-hand combat throughout the dojo where Stephen had found his first real peace in decades. Romano fought with desperate fury, using hidden weapons and dirty tactics, while Stephen relied on pure martial arts skill and the wisdom earned through decades of training. Romano was younger and more desperate, but Stephen's superior technique began to show as the fight progressed. They crashed through equipment, shattered mirrors, and left destruction in their wake as Romano's rage met Stephen's disciplined precision. The criminal pulled his concealed pistol in a final act of desperation, but Stephen disarmed him with a perfect Aikido technique, redirecting Romano's own aggression to defeat him. The gun clattered across the floor as Romano collapsed, unconscious. Stephen carefully disarmed the explosives using knowledge from his government training, his steady hands, defusing Romano's final threat. Patricia was freed unharmed, and federal agents moved in to arrest Romano's remaining associates. But as Stephen knelt beside his defeated enemy, he noticed Romano was smiling despite his unconsciousness, as if even in defeat, he'd achieved some hidden victory. Wednesday evening, 6:30 p.m. Romano regained consciousness in federal custody, his smile intact despite multiple injuries and the complete destruction of his operation. Stephen realized the criminal had orchestrated even his defeat as part of some larger plan. "You think you've won?" Romano laughed bitterly from his hospital bed, handcuffed to the rails. "My network spans 12 states. You've cut off one head, but there are others. I'll be out in 10 years, maybe less, and I'll find you again." Stevens' fears about Romano's surviving organization proved unfounded as Detective Martinez revealed the true scope of their victory. The evidence the students had gathered didn't just expose Romano's local operation. It had provided federal investigators with the intelligence needed to coordinate simultaneous raids across 3 states. While Stephen and Romano were fighting their personal battle, FBI agents were executing warrants from California to New York. Romano's entire rebuilt empire was being dismantled in a single coordinated operation that Martinez had orchestrated using the students' evidence. More than 40 arrests were made, including corrupt judges, police officials, city councilmen, and criminal associates. Romano's carefully constructed network of bribes, blackmail, and intimidation crumbled as federal agents seized bank accounts, construction companies, and legitimate businesses that served as fronts. That Romano's confident smile finally faded as he realized the magnitude of his defeat. His insurance policies and escape plans had all been neutralized by the evidence his own ego had compelled him to document. "The beautiful irony," Martinez explained to Stephen, "is that Romano's need to record his victories provided the evidence we needed to destroy him. His arrogance became his downfall." Stephen felt no satisfaction in Romano's destruction, only relief that the threat to innocent people had been eliminated. The criminal would face federal charges in multiple jurisdictions with overwhelming evidence, ensuring he'd never again threaten the communities he'd targeted. Romano made one final attempt to break Stephen's spirit. "You think this changes anything? There will always be others like me, and you're getting old. How many more fights do you have left?" Stephen's response showed his growth and wisdom. "Vincent, in 10 years, these kids I trained will be adults. They'll have families and communities to protect. You won't be facing one old man next time. You'll be facing everyone they've taught to stand up to people like you." Romano's expression revealed he finally understood that his defeat was complete and permanent. He hadn't just lost a battle. He'd lost a war against the very idea of community resistance to criminal exploitation. 2 months later, Saturday morning, 8 a.m., the Riverside Community Center had been completely renovated and expanded using funds recovered from Romano's seized assets. The dojo was larger, better equipped, and filled with students of all ages who'd been inspired by the story of their community's victory over organized crime. Stephen led a class that had grown from 3 frightened teenagers to more than 30. Students ranging from children to senior citizens. Marcus, Jenny, and Kevin assisted as junior instructors, their transformation from victims to protectors serving as inspiration for newcomers. Marcus had been accepted to college with a full scholarship, but planned to return after graduation to eventually take over as head instructor. His natural leadership abilities had blossomed under Stephen's guidance, and his understanding of martial arts philosophy had deepened beyond technique to encompass responsibility for others. Jenny had overcome her paralyzing shyness and now helped teach the youngest children, her gentle nature perfect for introducing them to martial arts principles. Her quiet strength had become an example for other shy students who discovered they too had courage they'd never recognized. Kevin had lost significant weight through training, but more importantly, had gained unshakable self-confidence and understanding of his value to the community. He'd become a peer counselor for other struggling teenagers, showing them that worth wasn't determined by appearance or social status. Tommy Castellano had opened his own legitimate boxing gym and regularly brought his students to train with Steven, creating a bridge between different martial arts styles that strengthened both programs. His redemption had become complete through service to others. The community center had become a model for other towns facing similar threats. Patricia Manning regularly fielded calls from communities requesting help in establishing their own programs. And Stephen had been consulted on 3 similar situations where organized crime had targeted small towns. As the morning class ended, Patricia approached with news that 3 more communities had requested Stephen's direct assistance in dealing with criminal organizations that had moved in after hearing about Romano's defeat. "Are you interested?" she asked, holding the requests. Stephen looked around the bustling dojo at his students practicing with dedication and purpose, then at the wall where newspaper clippings about Romano's conviction hung beside photos of the students' achievements and community service projects. "We'll see," he said with a slight smile, watching Marcus correct a new student's stance with patience Stephen recognized as his own. "First, let's make sure these kids are ready to handle whatever comes next." The story ended not with Stephen's voiceover, but with his quiet understanding. Real victory wasn't about defeating enemies. It was about creating communities strong enough to defend themselves, where one person's courage could inspire others to stand up for what was right, and where that strength would outlast any individual fighter. If you like the story, please watch another story on our channel and subscribe to the channel.